Hello, my name is Elisa Broche, and today I am here with Josh Beck, who is a student here at UNH, majoring in forensic science. Before we started with the project, you expressed that you were interested in talking about your duality as a Korean American. So, can you please give me a little bit about your background?
So I was born in Incheon, South Korea, and when I was around 2 years old, my dad moved to the United States all by himself. And he spent a year there alone, and after that, he wanted me, my brother, and my mom to move along with him. So I moved to the United States, and that's where I spent the rest of my life. For a few years after that, I only hung around Korean communities because that's what my parents grew up knowing, so they were afraid to branch out to other ones. So I was still exposed to nothing but the Korean community. However, when I was 6, I moved to what would end up being my hometown, and once I was there, I began to see all the different cultures that make up the hot pot that is the United States, and that's what really shaped me into being more than just a Korean.
So, you mentioned to me earlier how you decided to keep your Korean name as a way of respecting your culture and your parents' culture. So, how do you balance that multiculturalism?
The best way for me to focus on my multiple cultures is to focus on the best parts of each culture. Because growing up, I faced two very different cultures, and that was very dividing for me. Because Korea is very focused on you, the individual. It's very focused on you working hard and focusing on nothing but the work. You're all about profit in Korea. However, the United States is more focused on expressing yourself. It's all about standing out as a crowd and having fun taking your own interests. So, two very, very different worlds for me. However, I focused a lot of my time with the Korean culture because that's the one I always dealt with growing up at home. Unlike my friends, I wasn't allowed to go out and have fun as a kid. I was able to go out every once in a while, but at the end of the day, my focus and my parents' focus was on me succeeding in school. So after school, I would always come back home and immediately start studying or doing homework because at the end of the day, their idea of me standing out was with me succeeding in work. And I wasn't really allowed to focus on my interests growing up. My parents did encourage me to try extracurricular activities, but at the end of the day, they were just side activities. I could never focus on things I loved like work or art, music, movies, anything like that. I wasn't allowed to really focus on growing up. So I was expected to focus on sciences instead. And that turned me into kind of a selfish person. And that was a philosophy that was literally like beaten into me. But over time, I was able to change that and take parts from other cultures that I grew up with.
Was there any moment that you felt that you didn't want to keep your Korean heritage or give up your name?
There was never a time I wanted to change it because right now my legal name is Joshua Siwon Beck. And when I chose that name, my dad told me I could always get rid of the Korean name because it's hard for Americans to say. However, that name it represents the culture I grew up with, and I could never get rid of that. So, without any hesitation, I told him, this is the name I'm sticking with. At the end of the day, the Korean culture did kind of hurt me growing up, but I could never hold a grudge against it, you know? I could never hold a grudge against my parents, my family, or my nation because without it, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. So I told him I can't get rid of it. That would be like cutting out my ties to who I really am. And at the end of the day, I'm shaped by both the good and the bad of it.
Is there any difference between Sumin and Josh?
There is a difference. Josh is more expressive, he's more comedic, he's more focused on having fun with the crowd and focusing on just fun. Sumin is more focused on work, on studying, and doesn't really focus on hanging out with other people. Both of them are very shallow personalities on their own. However, when you bring them together, they have substance. It brings like all of me together, which is why I wanted my legal name to be both, because it showed the emphasis on all of my sides.
So, you are a junior. So this means that you have been far from home for a while. So, what does it mean to you to go back home?
Going back home for me now isn't really a big deal. Growing up, it was hard for me because I would have to flip my different personalities. I would be Josh outside and then Suman on the inside, and that was very difficult to deal with. However, my parents have changed a lot growing up, which I'm extremely grateful for because I grew up around a lot of people who went through something similar to me, that divide they feel at home and outside. And a lot of them don't forgive their parents for any of it. A lot of them hold a grudge against their parents and their nation for what they are. And I know a few people who would even like perpetuate the abuse they went through. And I think that's wrong. So I try not to divide myself anymore because at the end of the day, that also hurts my family. They don't get to know the real me. So I'd like them to know all of me. And I'm very grateful that they've accepted me for who I am.
And now, since you do mention different, things, and I want to jump a little into what are your plans for your future generations and what culture do you plan on teaching them?
Well, there is a part of me that would love to pass on the Korean culture because that's the one I grew up with. However, I know in my heart that I can't pass on the Korean culture because I never fully experienced it. On the other hand, I never fully experienced the United States culture either because I spent most of my life here, but I spent a lot of my time growing up with my other side. So I can never pass on a full experience for either culture. So ideally, I'd like my children, as silly as it is, to have the Josh culture, the culture that's all of me put together, the one that takes the best of both worlds. Because I want them to be studious. I want them to work hard like they would be if they learned from Korea. However, I want them to have fun. I want them to focus on them as an individual like they would in the United States. And I don't want to perpetuate like any of the difficulties I went through because it's easy to just fall back on what you know. It's easy to hold the grudge and stay like that, but it's hard to give up on it. It's hard to try something new. It's hard to pass on something better and make a brighter future. And I'm not perfect at it right now. I have a lot of my flaws still, both from growing up with both cultures and just me as a person. However, I'd like my kids to know that whatever they go through, they can rely on me and the beliefs I pass on to them.
This was Elisa Verge and Josh Beck exploring through building your identity while being surrounded with dual culturalism. This podcast is a part of the University of New Haven Welcome Project, a collection of stories about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. To listen to or watch more projects, visit newhavenwelcome.com.